to the debate. Today we are stepping into, well, one of the most volatile intersections in modern media. We're looking at the collision of Black representation in animation and the explosive, often controversial rise of generative AI. We are, I think we can all agree, living through what a lot of people are calling a major boom in Black animation, from the stylized revolution of Spider-Man into the Afro-Japanese fusion being pioneered by studios like Dart Shujio. But parallel to this human renaissance is the rise of the machine.
And that is exactly where the tension lies, because the question isn't just, can AI make Black art? I mean, that's too simple. The real question we have to ask is whether a technology built on statistical probability and, historical data is structurally capable of generating authentic Black animation. Or is it just, is it destined to churn out what critics are already calling ashy, caricatured, soulless imitations of Black identity?
It is the question of the year. I genuinely believe that while these tools are still raw, what we're looking at is the democratization of Afrofuturism. I'm going to argue that skilled synthesis, what experts are calling high signal prompting, is turning AI into a really revolutionary instrument for Black storytelling, putting studio-level power into the hands of independent creators.
And I'm coming at this from the engineering and the cultural side. I look at the underlying technology, the training data, the physics of how these models calculate light, and I just see a minefield. My position is that the statistical skew of these models favors Eurocentric features so heavily that using AI to generate Black characters, it results in technical failures that border on historical insensitivity.
Okay, so I want to start by just acknowledging the landscape we're standing on. You can't talk about this without noting that we're in a golden age of human-made Black animation. I mean, you look at the Proud Family, Louder and Prouder, or the incredible work being done by Dart Shujio in Tokyo, creating that global synthesis of anime aesthetics and Western storytelling. That's the baseline. But my position is that AI is not the enemy of this movement. It's the next evolution of it.
Evolution? Or is it a regression to a mean that doesn't include us?
Evolution. But, and this is a big but, only if it's wielded correctly. Look, the argument that AI produces slop, those low-effort generic images, that's a critique of the user, not the tool. When you look at the capabilities of models like Pony Diffusion XL or the new Flux One architecture, we aren't just talking about generating cartoons anymore. We're talking about computational recreation. We are seeing independent creators who don't have multi-million-dollar budgets using these tools to visualize stories like Ianu or Yasuke. If you know the recipes, if you understand the latent space, you can bypass the traditional gatekeepers who have, historically, ignored Black stories. It is about agency.
I struggle with the agency argument when the machine itself seems to fight you every single step of the way. You talk about bypassing gatekeepers, but aren't you just trading human gatekeepers for algorithmic ones? Let's break down how these models actually think for a moment. They operate on a most likely next pixel logic. And statistically, in the massive data sets these models were trained on, which, are scraped from the open internet, the most likely next pixel for a concept like hero or beautiful woman is not Black. It's Caucasian or East Asian.
That is a flaw in the legacy data. I do agree.
It's more than a flaw, it's a structural bias that's hard-coded into the weights of the model. So when an AI tries to correct for a Black character based on a simple prompt, it doesn't understand the phenotype. It just reverts to color swapping. It paints brown skin onto a Eurocentric bone structure. Or worse, and this is the technical failure we really need to talk about, it creates that ashy, gray skin tone. This happens because the model literally cannot calculate the lighting physics for melanin-rich skin. This isn't just my opinion. Look at the community backlash. You have the San Japan Convention enacting a zero-tolerance policy, evicting artists who can't prove their work isn't AI. They aren't doing that just to be Luddites. They're doing it because the community views this tech as a threat to authentic cultural expression.
The backlash is real, I agree, particularly with San Japan. But I think that reaction comes from seeing the slop, the bad output, rather than the mastery. But let's dig into that technical claim you made, because that is the heart of the ashy problem. You're talking about the failure of the models to calculate the specular highlight, right?
Exactly. Let's get technical for a second so the listeners really understand why this looks so bad.
Skin rendering relies on something called subsurface scattering. So when light hits pale skin, it penetrates the surface, it bounces around the red blood vessels underneath, and then it exits, giving it that sort of pinkish, flushy glow.
Right, like holding a flashlight up to your hand. You see the red glow through your fingers.
Precisely. But when light hits melanin-rich skin, the physics are totally different. Melanin absorbs more light. The specular highlight, that shiny spot where the light source hits the nose or the forehead, it needs to be sharper, and the shadow transition needs to be rich in color, not just darker. In traditional painting, you shade brown skin by shifting the hue toward like a deep reddish purple or even a navy blue. The AI doesn't know this. It just desaturates the color to make it darker. It essentially just adds gray, and the result is a character that looks zombie-like, lifeless, or ashy. It is a fundamental misunderstanding of physics within the model's weights.
I acknowledge that the default setting fails there. I absolutely do. If you just type black man into Midjourney or Stable Diffusion, you will likely get that gray cast. But this is where high signal prompting comes in. The sophisticated user knows the model is, for lack of a better word, lazy. So you force the calculation. You don't just prompt black man, you act as the lighting director. You prompt oiled skin. You prompt golden hour lighting to force warm tones. And you explicitly use the term subsurface scattering in your positive weights.
So you have to prompt for physics just to get a human skin tone?
Yes, you have to be the architect. When you force the AI to consider subsurface scattering and complex melanin, it corrects the calculation. It brings back that warm, healthy glow. It gets rid of the ashiness. It forces the machine to do the math it was trying to skit. And it goes beyond skin. You mentioned the color swapping issue regarding bone structure.
Which is rampant. I mean, you see black characters with the sharp, V-shaped chins and tiny noses of generic anime protagonists. It's essentially blackface anime. A Japanese or European face painted brown.
Right. But that happens because the prompter is using generic terms. If you type anime character, the model goes to the largest cluster in its latent space. You can think of latent space like a massive grocery store. The anime aisle is huge and it's filled with Japanese features. If you just ask for anime, that's where the cart goes. But if you use heritage-specific terms, if you prompt Nubian, Nigerian, Bantu knots, or melanin heavy, you steer the cart to a completely different aisle. You force it to recognize zygomatic prominence, the cheekbones, or wider mandibular variances. The bias exists, but it is navigatable if you have the vocabulary.
But look at the cognitive load you are placing on the creator here. To get a basic human-looking black character, you have to perform linguistic gymnastics. You have to actively fight the tool to stop it from making your character look like a corpse or a white person in makeup. And even if you fix the skin, we run straight into the texture of blackness, specifically hair. This is where the physics of the AI completely, utterly break down.
Hair is admittedly difficult. I mean, even for human animators, it's complex geometry.
It is, but humans understand the logic of the coil. Natural black hair from 3C to 4C textures operates on a physics system of blocks, or masses. In anime, hair is usually a fluid S-curve. It flows like water or silk. Coily hair has tension. It has a bounce. It requires a jagged line weight to indicate that coil. And AI models, they frequently render black hair as a solid, untextured helmet, or, on the other hand, just chaotic, fuzzy noise. It cannot figure out the interaction of light and coil.
I'm not convinced that's a permanent roadblock, though. It was a massive problem in older models, absolutely. But have you looked at what's happening with Flux 1? Or the specific LoRa's being built right now?
Okay, for our listeners who aren't deep in the code, define what you mean by a LoRa.
Sure. LoRa stands for Low Rank Adaptation. Think of a base AI model like a video game console. It has general graphics capabilities. A LoRa is like a specific game cartridge or maybe a software patch you plug in that teaches the model one specific thing very, very well. And there are now LoRa's specifically trained on black hairstyles, braids, locks, fades, twists.
I've seen them. They often look like plastic. The fade is usually where it fails most egregiously. It looks painted on rather than cut.
They're getting better rapidly. The S-curve bias is being trained out. Advanced users are now using spatial instructions like dreads pulled back or fade with a crisp lineup, and they are combining this with something called the Mishana Marembo technique.
The beautiful girl technique? You mean using Swahili?
Exactly. And this is a fascinating bit of semantic hacking. By using Swahili or other African languages in the prompt phrases like Misichana Mrembo, you're steering the algorithm away from the Western default data clusters. You're pushing the machine into these pockets of the dataset that were likely tagged by diverse creators or involve specific African aesthetics. It bypasses that generic black filter and accesses a more authentic visual library.
That is a clever workaround, I will grant you that. It's almost poetic that you have to speak an African language to get the machine to respect African features. But it brings up the issue of cultural signifiers and, the soul of the art. You mentioned the lineup.
The crisp edge at the temple, yeah.
In modern Black culture, the lineup is a critical aesthetic marker. It signifies care, grooming, precision. It's cultural currency. AI output, the stuff often called slop, is distinguishable because that line is almost always blurry or crooked. It's messy. It lacks intentionality. A human artist at a studio like Dart Stagio puts intention into that line because they know what it means. The AI just sees a transition from skin to hair. It misses the culture behind the geometry.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. You're comparing AI slop, lazy one-click generation, with great AI. And there is a massive difference. The hatred we see online, like the Reddit discourse around the has-been hotel posters, where AI is literally used as an insult, that's a reaction to low-effort work. It's a reaction to people who don't care about the lineup.
But that low-effort work is 90% of what's being produced. You have communities calling the internet an AI-flooded cesspool.
Because the barrier to entry is low, but the ceiling is high. Great AI requires a recipe. It's a complex string of instructions involving aspect ratios, lighting physics, style references like Niji style, and quality tags. When done right, it accelerates that global synthesis we talked about. We are seeing a blurring of lines between Japanese anime and Black cultural media, the blurred aesthetic.
But is it synthesis or is it theft?
It's synthesis if it enables new voices. Think about the economics. Animation is expensive, prohibitively so. AI allows a kid in their bedroom to visualize stories that major studios won't touch. Look at the reception of Ayanu or The Legacy of Yasuke. These stories prove the audience is there, but the industry gatekeepers are risk-averse. AI allows that kid to create a pitch deck or a short film that looks like it cost $1 million. It allows them to visualize their own Afrofuturism. It democratizes the visuals of success.
But at what cost? You talk about Yasuke and Ayanu. Those are human-made achievements. They have soul because humans made choices about every single line. When you outsource that to a machine, you risk returning to the minstrel prototypes of the past, just with a higher resolution. The machine doesn't know that Black shouldn't trigger data about poverty or crime, which we know is a deeply embedded bias in these data sets.
That is why we don't just use the word Black as a standalone prompt. We use melanin heavy, we use royal, we use scientist, we use cyberpunk. We positively reinforce the prompt to bypass those negative filters. We are actively retraining the association in the latent space.
But the fact that you have to do that proves my point. The tool is hostile by default. It requires an immense amount of correction. And I worry that relying on a machine that statistically skews toward whiteness is a dangerous path for representation. We are trying to move beyond the struggle narrative in media, but using AI seems to be a struggle narrative of its own, fighting the algorithm just to exist authentically.
I see it as a confrontation, sure. AI is a mirror. It reflects our societal biases, yes, but it also responds to precision. Through computational recreation, Black creators are becoming the architects. They are forcing the machine to learn. They're creating the Lauras that fix the hair. They're discovering the prompts that fix the skin.
Or they're doing free labor to fix a broken product someone else built?
Perhaps, but consider the alternative. If Black creators reject this tool, the default will remain Eurocentric. If we don't colonize this latent space,
Someone else will, and they won't care about the lineup or the subsurface scattering. As creators master this latent space, they are carving out a place where Black characters can simply be. Not symbols, not stereotypes, but heroes, villains, royalty.
But can they be if they lack the human touch? You mentioned the blurred aesthetic, Black nerd culture. That culture is built on authenticity, on knowing the references. Kente cloth isn't just a pattern, it's history. A do-rag isn't just a hat, it's functionality and fashion. When AI generates these things, it is engaging in surface-level mimicry. It doesn't understand the weight of the imagery.
Does it need to understand the history to produce a compelling image that inspires a child? If an AI-generated comic book hero looks like them, has the right skin tone, the right hair texture, because the creator used the right tools, does the child care that a neural network calculated the pixels?
I think they might eventually, because art is communication. It's one human saying to another, I see you. A machine cannot see you. It can only predict you. And for Black people who have been predicted by society in very negative ways for centuries, that distinction matters. The human touch, exemplified by the artists at studios like Dart Stagio, that remains the only surefire way to ensure anatomical and cultural respect.
And yet, the synthesis continues. The technology will get better. The ashy skin will be solved by better lighting calculations. It's already happening with Flux One. The slop will be filtered out by taste. The question remains whether the industry will embrace these creators who are mastering the tools or shut them out because of where the pixels came from.
That is the question we will have to watch play out in real time. It's a fight for the visual definition of Blackness in the digital age.
Indeed. It's a complex issue with no easy answers, but it's one that is defining the future of animation. We've seen how the technology fails, but also how it can be guided.
Absolutely. And for everyone listening, pay attention to the details. Look for the lineup. Look for the light in the skin. That's where the truth lies.
Thank you for listening to The Debate.